Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata podcast. I am your host, Andrea Pranzatelli, and this is episode number 47 on my podcast here on YouTube. Before we get into it, this is a podcast where I interview comedians, musicians, and different artists and entrepreneurs from the New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia area. Sometimes I do a solo podcast like I am today, so we're going to get right into that. Before we get into it, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and don't forget to comment on anything that I talk about throughout today's episode. Today's going to be a bit of a controversial episode, so it might be a nice time for you to chime in, and we can have a conversation in the comment section below. But anyways, so today I'm having just a solo podcast, and it's going to be audio only. My apologies. I usually post a video, but I'm double booking today. I have a live guest that was supposed to come last week. He is a comedian from Philadelphia, so I'm really excited to interview him because I usually interview comedians from New York and New Jersey. This is going to be my first time interviewing a comedian from Philadelphia, so I'm really pumped about that because you guys know I'm highly considering moving to Philadelphia when my lease is over in New Jersey, and I just want to hear, I have a lot of questions for him, but he was supposed to come last week and he got booked a gig, so we postponed it to today. So now I have to get a podcast for you guys out ASAP, so there is no time to put the video up because that takes a few days to edit. So you're only getting audio today, and today is going to be a bit of a political rant. As I said earlier in this podcast, if you guys want to chime in on the conversation, feel free to. I get a lot of people who inbox me on Instagram and they're like, hey, I listened to your podcast and I have this to say, but I don't know why you don't just comment here. That kind of makes more sense. And it definitely helps me a lot more when I get the comments here on YouTube instead of my Instagram inbox. But anyways, so before I get into the political rant that I want to go into, I just have a couple things to say. One, totally unrelated to anything political. Just I feel like I want to say it because this is a podcast and we talk about everything. One, I am so fucking excited that here in New Jersey, it is going to finally warm up. We had some really cold days the past few days. It felt really cold to me the past few days. It felt like 17. I think it was like 17 degrees. It was 11 degrees at one point. It's 40 degrees today, and tomorrow we're actually going to go up to 60 and later in the week. So that's I don't know if this means we're getting to the end of winter. I'm not sure. You know how weather is these days. So one day it could be like 11 degrees and then 60 degrees. And then in April we'll get snow. It's fucking crazy. But all I have to say is that I'm so excited that it's warming up because I don't know. I really like to dress up and look pretty, and I like fashion, and I like wearing nice clothes, and I feel like I don't really have a winter sex appeal. Like I don't feel like I really got the winter fashion down. Like I could do spring, summer, and fall easily. Like I love dressing up for those seasons, but for winter, I'm just like, okay, I have a giant hat on, I have a giant scarf on. I just feel, I don't know. I feel kind of like a coddled little baby. Like I don't really feel womanly, I don't know. So I'm really excited that the weather's getting nicer so I can kind of go into my closet and dress up nicely. But anyways, that's totally unrelated to what this podcast is about. Just wanted to throw that out there. This podcast, so I had left a disclaimer in the bio section of last week's podcast where I touched up on the controversy going on with Joe Rogan and Spotify. I don't know if anybody noticed, but in the bottom of the bio section, I wrote a disclaimer saying that, hey, this episode was recorded before at that point that I recorded that episode, I had only known about the Joe Rogan, Spotify, Neil Young aspect of that whole controversy. Just a few days later after I posted that video, then there was the racial aspect of this controversy released, which, again, if you don't really know what's going on, it might be best if you just leave this YouTube episode and kind of do your research yourself, or else none of this is going to make sense to you. But I feel like at this point, most of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about, who listen to this podcast and follow what I'm talking about. Also, if you wanted, I'll actually leave another thing. I'll leave a link in the bio section below of this episode. If you really are clueless and you want to know what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link to my last week's episode. And not only that, but in last week's episode, it's a full like hour and a half podcast. So not the entire podcast is about that controversy. So if you go in the comment section, there's a timestamp that will shoot you right to the part I'm talking about. So if you're confused, just go to that right now. But anyway, so for those of you who do know what I'm talking about and who can follow what I'm saying, I had left a disclaimer in last week's episode stating that, hey, I was not aware of the racial controversy, that aspect of everything going on. And I was not aware of that until like a day or two after I posted that. So I wanted to kind of follow up with that and touch up with that this week, because I feel like, it came out as kind of insensitive that I would support Joe Rogan, but not at all bring up, the video of him that was leaked around a few days later, where he was, it was basically clips of him using the N-word throughout his podcast over the years. I first want to say, well, first of all, what I first want to say is that I feel like this episode's going to be a little bit ranty, and I should have written more of this down so it comes across more organized. So I'm sorry if this is a little bit all over the place, but I do have a lot to say, and I'm going to try my absolute best to keep it organized mentally and to keep it under 45 minutes. Also keep in mind that I have not eaten anything today, and it's like 11 o'clock. So I feel a little jittery because I have coffee in my system, and literally the only thing in my system right now is caffeine and coconut water. And it's like almost 12 o'clock. I'm fasting right now because your girl has been eating a lot. I'm in a new relationship now, and when like you first start seeing somebody and you're happy and you're eating and you don't really pay attention to that stuff. I notice I've been eating a lot, like with my new lover, and I'm like, shit, I've got to rein this in before it gets out of control. So I'm kind of fasting this morning. But anyways, so let's get into the political stuff. So Joe Rogan had released, not Joe Rogan had released the video. People had released this video of Joe Rogan, and it's a compilation of him using the N-word freely on his podcast. Over, the course of the many years of his podcast. And I think it also included kind of a racist story that he said, where, long story short, he had compared black people to apes. Okay. I did not talk about this on last week's episode, and I didn't want that to come across. I wanted to kind of disclaim that and talk about that now, because like I said, I didn't want that to come across as insensitive. Like I was only bringing up the things that supported what I had to say and completely ignoring other things, which I think is a common thing that people do in politics, is they sort of only bring up the things that support their argument. But when it comes to other things that would make their argument look bad, they just totally avoid that. So I just kind of wanted to let you guys know I wasn't doing that at that point of when I recorded that. I was completely unaware. It wasn't until a day or two later that I saw that video compilation with Joe Rogan. So I did want to kind of follow up on that and let you know how I feel about that. I do want to say I was shocked when I saw that. I didn't like it. I don't agree with his behavior. I do think it's racist. There's no doubt about that. There's no argument about that. Using the N-word is racist if you're a white person. Comparing black people to apes is racist. I have no argument against that. I do still support Joe Rogan, and I'm going to explain why. I know that comes across as insensitive, but that's what this episode is about, and I want to kind of talk about the political end of things. So first of all, what I want to say is that I've been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast for 4 years now. I want to say 3 to 4 years. First of all, I have never heard him use the N-word on his podcast. I've heard him use the N-word like the way I'm doing it right now. Like he literally said the phrase the N-word, and it was in context of like what I'm talking about right now. He wasn't saying that to talk badly. He was either quoting lyrics or, you know, talking about something like I'm talking about now. So I have seen that, as I've seen many people use the phrase the N-word in completion like I am right now. I have never heard him freely use the actual N-word in the past 4 years that I've been listening to his podcast. And I've been listening to pretty much every single, I don't want to say every single podcast, but a lot. I've listened to a lot of his podcasts. So when I saw that compilation video of him out, I was sad, and I was pretty disgusted that's I didn't know he was capable of that. I was like, wow, I've never seen this side of Joe Rogan before. This isn't the Joe Rogan I've been listening to. You know what I mean? The Joe Rogan I've been listening to the past 4 years has shown a lot of compassion, a lot of humility, a lot of strength, a lot of open-mindedness, a lot of love, a lot of support. Nothing racist, nothing hateful, you know what I mean? And so I was shocked to see those videos and disgusted by it. But like I said, I still support him now because that's not the Joe Rogan I've been listening to the past 4 years. And this is where the political end of things comes in the conversation, which is, you know, a bit controversial, but I'm sorry, but people can change. You know what I mean? That Joe Rogan that he was 10 years ago. And again, and then if we even get into the deeper end of that, I do think he knew better at the time. I do think that he knew that was a controversial, wrong thing to say. I don't think that he hated black people. The things he said were racist, but I don't think there was hateful intent behind it. First of all, every single time that he used the N-word in those clips, it was related to conversations in which he was discussing the politics of the N-word, kind of like I am right now. But he, instead of masking it, he just used the full N-word. But in none of those conversations was he talking about black people in a hateful way. The only thing that was genuinely pretty gross to me was the joke that he made relating black people to apes. Okay. That was a racist joke, but again, I do not believe that he was using it in a way where he was hating black people. I think that he maybe back then was a different person, and he was kind of just like, fuck it, I'm going to say this, you know, because I think it's funny and whatever. Like I said, I don't agree with it, but I don't think that person that you guys see floating around, those clips of him 10 years ago, are who he is today. I think people change. I think people, I don't like this notion that if you did something wrong 10 years ago, that you should be forever banned and you should be canceled. I don't think that's right. I think people can change, and people do change. And I think the fact that somebody can go from that person that he was 10 years ago to the person he is today is actually a beautiful thing, because not a lot of people can change. There's not a lot of people out there who could look back at that and admit they were wrong. A lot of people would sit there and argue, like, a lot of people would make an argument like, oh, it's freedom of speech and whatnot. But I think what I love about Joe Rogan is he's the type of person who can look back at his old behaviors and self-assess and apologize and admit he was wrong. And I don't think a lot of people can do that. So I think it's pretty amazing that he could do that. And I still support him because, like I said, that isn't the person I've been listening to the past 4 years. I haven't been listening to... Now, like even when I look back at that video of the one where he was making that ape joke, he doesn't even... like, the way he carries himself is different. He carries himself completely differently in that video. That does make him look really bad. Like he had more of an ego, I guess you could say. Like I can literally see like he's trying to be this tough guy. Like he's trying to be, he's saying that joke, you know, he's not really caring about what that joke. He's trying to get he's trying to get a rise out of people, and he doesn't really care about the consequences of that joke. He does. I think apparently they only got little clips of him using the N-word, and I think apparently in that video he does continue to say, "Wow, that was a really racist thing to say." He admits it. So I guess I can't completely say he didn't have a sense of self-awareness back then, but he was so completely different in that video than the Joe Rogan I've been listening to today. So because of that, I think that's actually a really good sign that this is somebody who can change. Every now and then, like, we're all human, you know, and we all do stupid things. So of course, every now and then I see him raising his voice in his podcast, and a little bit of ego here and there. But more than not, I've seen him show so much humility, show so much love, show so much compassion. Obviously, he's changed his perception of whether he's allowed to use the N-word freely, because he doesn't use it freely anymore. I have heard him use the phrase "the N-word" like we're using it right now. So, and this really kind of leads us into more of a political conversation. It's funny because I don't really talk about politics a whole lot on this podcast. But now I suddenly am starting to care a little more about politics because it's affecting something that I care about, which I know is selfish. I feel like that's a selfish thing to say suddenly. All right, now I care about politics because it's affecting something I care about. I do realize that's a little bit selfish, but I don't know. I also think it's not selfish at the same time, because it's like, but there's so many political issues and politics are so complex that I can't possibly care about every issue every single day. I wouldn't have a life to live. Like I wouldn't have, like, I can't make all my life politics. So it kind of, on one hand it is selfish, but on the other hand, it kind of makes sense that if there's only so much time in a day for me to focus on politics, it kind of makes sense that I focus on the things that I actually have experience with, you know what I mean? Than trying to unravel certain political issues that I have no idea what's going on, you know? So not only that, but there's this whole argument that if you don't care about politics, that you're taking it for granted because you're privileged, right? There's this whole argument that if you don't care about politics, it's because you're too privileged to give a damn. And I don't really agree with that, because it's like, really, you know, the majority of last year, my bank account was in negative. I was having suicidal ideations and I couldn't eat some days. So can I have some food on my fucking plate before I get into a conversation about transgender rights? Like, you know what I mean? So the idea that all these Americans are just so privileged, that's why they don't care about politics. It's like I said, by the way, I'm doing much better now. My financial situation is better, so please don't worry about me. My financial situation is better, and I'm like on medication and stuff and been going to therapy. So don't worry about that aspect of what I just said. But I'm just saying, like, a lot of my life I've struggled. So to me to sit here and care about politics all the time, I don't have time. Like I need to, can I please get food on my plate before I have a conversation with you? But what I'm getting at here is I do have food on my plate now. And now there's things affecting things that I care about, because again, this is a podcaster I've been listening to for the past 4 years that I have gained so much from. Like, I've gained so much insight, and I've even noticed myself changing as a person. I've noticed that by seeing him demonstrate so much love and compassion and humility, I myself have been able to change and demonstrate humility and compassion for other people, which I wasn't always the case. I used to be a very stubborn person, and just by seeing the example of somebody who can be so humble and can be so self-reflective, it's really inspired me to kind of do the same with myself. And you know, but anyways, so the political aspect of things, I do want to say that I personally right now feel really disgusted with how extremely, and I know everybody says this, so I know this isn't news, but I do want to kind of weigh in on my perspective of that. I feel like politics today have become so divided. And let me make this clear, by the way. It's funny, if you support Joe Rogan, you're automatically assumed to be a conservative, which I find really funny because Joe Rogan has so many liberal views. You know, he was somebody who got into so many political arguments with guests about why marijuana should be legal. It sounds pretty fucking liberal to me. He was a huge supporter of Bernie Sanders. It was he was his favorite candidate. So I don't know. It's just funny to me that I feel like people listening to this might automatically assume I'm a conservative because I'm supporting Joe Rogan, and that's kind of like going to lead into some of the stuff I want to talk about. No, I'm not a conservative. I'm actually born out of a Democratic family, and I have I would say mostly liberal views. There's a couple things that I'm a little more conservative about. I would say probably gun rights. I'm pro gun rights and stuff like that. But mostly I would say like I check pretty much the boxes of liberal Democratic views. But what I'm getting at is I feel like politics are so divided right now that I almost don't even like to call myself a liberal anymore, because to me it's starting to mean a new thing. And I don't like people on the far left, and I don't like people on the far right. It's becoming too extreme on both ends of the spectrum that they're sort of becoming the same exact thing in a way. Like they're going so far apart and so extreme that they're kind of becoming the same thing. Like, for example, it's funny to me how and again, I'm just using far left as the example right now. I don't like the far right or the far left right now. But I'm just going to use this as an example. It's funny to me how people on the far left throw around the word bigot a lot. They'll be like, so-and-so is a bigot, so-and-so is a bigot. But if you look up the definition of bigot, let me look it up right now. Hold on. Bigot definition. A person who is obstinately or unreasonably attached to a belief or opinion. So it's funny to me that people on the far left like to point out how bigoted people are on the far right, but they're both bigoted. They're both like people on I think that's what's really confusing me about the far left right now, is because people on the far left are becoming so rigid that they're becoming bigoted in their own way. Like, since when did freedom have so many rules? Since when did liberalism have so many rules? You know what I mean? And relating this back to the Joe Rogan conversation, again, I don't think it's right that people can look at clips of, and again, I feel like I should have written this down because my mind's kind of going all over the place, but let's stick with this. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people can look at these clips of Joe Rogan without really knowing the full spectrum of who he is as a human being, and really listening to his podcast and really putting time into understanding who he is, and make such grand claims about him based off of these small clips they've seen without really seeing the big picture. And I feel like a lot of what the far left is doing right now is they're becoming so rigid. Okay, if you've said this, you're a piece of shit, and you're a bigot, you're a piece of shit, and you deserve to be canceled, and your voice doesn't deserve to be heard. But I don't agree with that. I think it's important that we look at the bigger picture when it comes to political issues. I think it's important to hear both sides of the story. You know what I mean? And it's funny. I think that's really why Joe Rogan has gained such popularity over the years. I think people are genuinely thirsty for an authentic conversation. I don't think, I talked about this in my last podcast episode, okay? And again, there's a link in that below if you want to see that. when I grew up from a very political family, and they were Democratic. And I just remember I always supported my family because they were my family, and of course you're going to trust your family. But I remember once I became a teenager, I started to ask more questions. And I remember asking my father, I said, Dad, I know you're a Democrat, but if there's a whole nother side that's Republican, how do you really know which ones are telling the truth? And by the way, no hate on my dad. I love my dad. But his response to me at the time, and this was, I'm going to be 34 in May, and I must have been 16 or 17 when I asked him this. His response to me was, well, there's 3 news stations. One is very moderate, one is very Republican, and one is very Democratic. And what you can do is just listen to all 3 and base your opinion on what you listen to and who you trust and who you believe. So I remember I tried it, and what I found was that every single station that I listened to, I felt compelled to believe each station. Like when I would tune into Fox, I'd be like, oh my God, they're making such good points, and I kind of believe them now. And when I would tune into CNN, I would believe them. And it got to the point where I was so confused that I was like, well, I don't know who to believe. And not only that, but these news stations were kind of all sticking to one very specific script. It was like, okay, if you're a Democrat, you must believe these bullet points. And if you're a Republican, you must believe these bullet points. And sometimes you're in between. But I feel like, I don't know. I just felt like I would get, I was only a teenager at the time, but I felt like I would get so confused trying to figure all this out. And I would ask so many questions to the point where I would just kind of shut it down mentally. I was like, this is so complicated. I'm just going to shut my mouth and support my family. They're Democrats. I'm just going to do that. I don't even want to get involved. I always voted Democratic to support my family, and I helped my father with his campaigns. But internally, I always felt like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. I'm confused. I'm just kind of having faith in my parents. But as I got older, those views started to change a little bit. And the reason why I was so drawn to Joe Rogan's podcast was because for the first time, I finally found something that was addressing my concerns. I was like, okay, this is somebody who isn't just blindly following this script or blindly following this script. This is a person who is having an authentic conversation that lasts multiple hours, with all different types of people from all different perspectives, all different backgrounds, etc. And I think that was something that then when I started getting more interested in politics again, when I can kind of see the fuller picture that way, you know what I mean? I don't know why people, again, I know I picked mostly on the far left, and I think it's because I feel like people on the far left are kind of who is attacking Joe Rogan right now. But I also have issues on the far right too. For example, a major issue on the far right would be QAnon. That shit pisses me off too. You know what I mean? I'm like I said, I'm just kind of disgusted by both ends of the spectrum. So that's why a voice like Joe Rogan is so refreshing, because this is a person who's willing to sit down and kind of think things through. And it's so funny to me that how controversial that is. Why is that so controversial? To ask questions, you know what I mean? To ask questions about what's going on. For example, there were clips going around about Joe Rogan, kind of similar to the N-word thing, that he was anti-trans, okay? He was against trans people. Joe Rogan is not against trans people. He has trans friends. He doesn't give a shit. He's a very liberal person, and I've heard him say multiple times that he is in support of gay marriage. He doesn't give a fuck what you do, what makes you happy. However, he did have a conversation where he was questioning, he was asking the question, and he was having a discussion about whether it's fair or not that if a trans who was originally male then becomes a woman, is that trans woman now allowed to compete with women in athletic competition? And I think that's a valid fucking question, because even if you cannot deny that men are stronger naturally than women. Okay, so if a trans man then becomes a woman, wouldn't he still possess that same strength and have an advantage over a naturally born woman in athletic competition? And I think that's a legitimate question. And I think that's a question, and again, you're not allowed to have this conversation. If you even say that, you're a bigot. You know what I mean? And I think that's fucking ridiculous. And I hate to say it, but it kind of embarrasses me to be a liberal. Like, I am a liberal and I have mostly liberal views, but it embarrasses me to have the title liberal when that's what it's associated with. When it's associated with this like really strong, you have to think this way, and if you don't agree with me and if you ask any questions, you're a piece of shit and you deserve to be canceled. I think that is so harsh. And again, that is just as harsh as QAnon. I think they're both really harsh. They're both ridiculous. And again, I think that's why Joe Rogan has gained such popularity, because he's tapped into something that the public is really hungry for right now. The public doesn't, man, like this is, I feel like this is a complicated subject, and it's like one that's going to take a long time to really uncover, but it's like, you can't just, I feel like we digest our politics in quick, like the way we digest Instagram and the way we digest TikTok and the way we digest Facebook. We just go on, read a headline, or we just go on and read a quick thing from CNN or a quick thing from Fox, and that's how we base our information off of. For example, I was having a conversation with somebody about the Joe Rogan controversy, and she was like, I don't know about you, but I can't support somebody who's been using the N-word for the past 10 years. And I'm like, well, he hasn't been using the N-word for the past 10 years. He's been using the N-word 10 years ago, or maybe 8 years ago. I don't know. But he has not been using it for the past 10 years. But the headlines and the quick news bites will manipulate you in a way where that's what you see. And honestly, I don't blame you. Like, if you saw that in a quick headline and you believed that, I wouldn't blame you for hating him. Like, if I just saw right now a news headline about somebody that I didn't know and I never listened to them, I never investigated, and it was like, so and so has no problem with using the N-word, I'd be like, holy shit, what a fucking asshole. But then you dig in deeper and you find out, oh, wait a second, this is kind of different than what I thought it was. So I was having an argument with my friend about it, and she was like, I don't care if you support somebody who uses the N-word freely, you are supporting racism. I'm like, he doesn't use the N, he used to, and he hasn't for the past 6 years. You know what I mean? Again, I can only really confirm that the past 4 years he hasn't used it, because I had been listening to his podcast that long. But what I read when I read more deeper is that he hasn't used it for 6 years. 6 years ago he was using it. And she's like, oh, really? And then when I told her that, she was like, oh, really? I thought he's been using it for 10 years. I'm like, no, he hasn't. I can tell you, I've been listening to his podcast every day for 4 years. I have never heard him use that word. And she goes, oh, well, I don't really listen to his podcast. And I'm like, this is exactly my fucking point, is like the way we're digesting politics and news now, and these, and not only that, but I think that the people who put out these news bites, I'm calling them bites because they're small, these news bites and these short, quick little headlines, not only that, they're purposely trying to make you angry. These things are purposely geared towards pissing you off and getting you heated so you can get involved in the conversation and pick a side. Doesn't anybody see that? Like, wake the fuck up, people. It's funny, the word woke is being thrown around by both ends of the spectrum. So if you're a liberal, and you use the word woke, in that context, it means a lot of things like wake up to misogyny and wake up to the patriarchy and wake up to racism, that type of stuff. But if you're woke on the conservative side, it's like, wake up, there's a conspiracy, and people in Hollywood are drinking blood of children. Like that's what the word woke means on different ends of the spectrum. But I kind of want to define the word woke. To me, it's like, wake up on the bullshit that's going on both ends. Like, wake up, fucking people. Like, are you not aware that when you are, again, the word bigoted, it's so funny that this word is being thrown around. Like, they're both bigoted. You're both bigoted. Like, if you're a far extreme leftist, you're a bigot, and if you're a far extreme right, on the right, conservative, you're a bigot. Like, wake up the fuck to that. Wake up, like, people. Like, come on. There's some bullshit going on here. And again, going back to the Joe Rogan stuff, I did want to follow up too on about what I said about the misinformation stuff last week, because I didn't completely say that. I wanted to mention that another thing in addition to that is that, again, there's these clips going around saying very harshly that Joe Rogan is spreading misinformation about COVID and millions of people will die and have died because of Joe Rogan's podcast. First of all, what they're referring to is a podcast where he interviewed Robert Malone. Let me read Robert Malone's credentials to you. Robert Malone is an American physician and biochemist. His early work focused on mRNA technology, pharmaceuticals, and drug repurposing research. Okay, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a pretty legit fucking source to me. This is somebody who's very heavily involved in the pharmaceutical field. You know what I mean? He's not just some like conspiracy theorist from the streets. So the fact that, okay, all right, there's a lot going on in my head. I don't even know which. Okay. First of all, I want to say that I don't think it's weird. I don't think it's strange that when vaccines first came out for COVID-19, I don't think it's strange to ask questions. I think it's strange to just blindly follow the mainstream narrative without asking questions. Keep in mind, I did get vaccinated. Afterthought, I was late to get vaccinated because I wasn't comfortable just jumping into, I just trust what I hear on the news and I'm just going to get a vaccine. And I'm going to tell you why. Because again, I have been raised very liberal, and a lot of my childhood and early adulthood, I have been told the liberal narrative has been, don't trust the pharmaceutical companies. That's what I've been told my whole life. You know, I remember when my grandmother passed away, there was a lot of skepticism within my own family that there was like conspiracy within my own family that the medicine she was taking is what killed her, and the doctors and the pharmaceutical companies killed her. You know what I mean? Like that they were, I mean, I don't want to get into it because it's like, I don't want to talk about my family like that. But long story short, I've been told my whole life that I shouldn't trust the pharmaceutical companies, that they're trying to make money. Okay. That they're not trying to help you. They're trying to keep you sick. They're trying to make money. I had a podcast guest on who said the same thing about the pharmaceutical company and African Americans. He's a black comedian, and he said that he wasn't vaccinated because he had been skeptical about his whole life about the pharmaceutical companies and black people. He didn't trust that the pharmaceutical companies had the best interest in the African American population. Okay. But anyways, going back to what I was saying. So my whole life I've been told by the liberal narrative and by my family that I shouldn't trust medicine. But now all of a sudden, really quickly, I have to suddenly trust them. That doesn't make sense to me. And because of that, I don't think it's strange to ask questions. And I don't think it's strange to want to know the opinion of, again, a very highly qualified person. Okay. Again, you want me to read it again? He's a physician and a biochemist. His early work focused on mRNA technology, pharmaceuticals, and drug repurposing research. I want to know everybody's opinion, and I don't think it's wrong to want to know the opinion of all different doctors, all different scientists, the ones that are pro-vaccine and the ones that are anti-vaccine. As an American, I want to know all these perspectives so I can make a decision. I did choose to get vaccinated, but I wanted to first hear I wanted to first make sure that none of my friends died before I got the vaccine. And I also wanted to hear everybody's perspective and kind of think about it fully, because again, this was a major sudden shift. It's like, okay, I was told my whole life not to trust the pharmaceutical companies. Now I have to. I mean, I don't, I don't believe that Joe Rogan was spreading misinformation by asking questions and having on a doctor with an opposing view. I think it's important and quite honestly strange if you don't want to hear an opposing view before making a decision with your body. You know what I mean? Not only that, but I feel like it's inherent, it's human nature. I feel like it's this is me personally, I feel like it's human nature to feel skeptical about things that are being pushed on you so heavy. You know what I mean? And I feel like because the narrative is still like, get a vaccine or else you're a piece of fucking shit. Get a vaccine or else you're an asshole and you're trying to kill everybody. That kind of makes me like it as a human, it's just like a human instinct. It makes me think like, why is this being pushed on me so hard? It kind of like, okay, for example, when I was a teenager, I remember hearing in school and hearing from my parents, don't have sex, it's bad. Don't have sex. You shouldn't have sex. It's bad. And then I'm just like, geez, I want to have sex. Because if so many people are telling me how bad it is, it must be pretty good. Like, you know what I mean? And it was good. And I tried it and it was great. But again, when this thing keeps being shoved down your throat, I feel like it's human instinct to wonder why and to ask questions. Not only to mention, going back to that conversation about Robert Malone, you guys realize that, and I feel like that kind of sounded condescending. I didn't mean like, you idiots. I just mean, in case you don't know, medicine and science are all practices. There's a reason. Okay, you know when you go to the doctors and it says family practice on the title there, it's because it's a practice and because they are admitting that they don't know all the answers, and it's an ever evolving practice. And that's not just me saying that. I've actually had a doctor tell me that because I asked them. I was like, why is it called family practice? And they were like, because it's an ever evolving thing. Technology is constantly changing. Medicine is constantly changing. Science is constantly changing. Science, like people always say, trust the science. Science and medicine are constantly evolving. Do you remember when lobotomies were a good idea? You know what I mean? I don't believe I was alive for it, but I've read about it. And if you don't know what a lobotomy is, look it up. But at one point in time, lobotomies were a hot technology. Okay. And not only that, I'm no historian, but I've heard this phrase enough that history repeats itself. I've heard that enough to know that it must be true. You know, history repeats itself. And hasn't there been plenty, and again, I'm not a historian, so I can't name tons of examples, but I've heard enough to know that hasn't there been a lot of examples in history where, flat earth, right? Hasn't there been a lot of examples in history where people thought one thing and then they were like, 10 years later, they're like, oh, fuck, we were wrong. You know, like at one point in time, we thought the earth was flat and now we know it's round. Actually, some people think it's flat again, but that's a whole nother thing. So again, history repeats itself. People get things wrong. Medicine can be wrong. Science can be wrong. Things are ever evolving. So if there's somebody in the field who is highly credentialed, why wouldn't you want to hear his opinion before making a decision what to do with your body? Okay. I think it's strange and quite frankly bigoted to shame people for wanting to ask these questions and wanting to think about things thoroughly before making a decision. Now, again, wow, big surprise. I'm a Joe Rogan listener and I did not die from COVID, and I did choose ultimately to get a vaccine after listening to many different perspectives and the good, the bad, the ugly. Listening to all the different perspectives, I had decided that it was a better idea for me to get vaccinated than it was for me to not. At this point, I'm not 100% sure about getting boosted. I have not yet been boosted. And for those of you who don't know, that wasn't intentional. I was going to get boosted, but because I had gotten vaccinated late in the game, because I really wanted to weigh out the pros and cons of getting vaccinated first, I wanted to really sit there and I wanted to listen to everybody's perspective and hear everything out. I ultimately decided to get vaccinated. The reason I didn't get boosted is because you are supposed to get boosted 5 or 6 months after you get your first vaccine. I wasn't due for one yet because I had gotten vaccinated pretty late. Now I ended up getting COVID which is kind of funny when you think about it. I didn't get COVID till after I got vaccinated. When I wasn't vaccinated, I didn't get COVID, and I was definitely exposed to it. I was in bed with a man who had COVID. And then when I did get vaccinated, that's when I ended up getting COVID. So that's again, I'm just asking questions and I'm just pointing this out. I have not yet been boosted. I may or may not get boosted. I don't know yet. Again, it's one of those things that I want to think about and weigh out. I'm not boosted as of yet because I was due for the booster pretty much like the same week that I had gotten COVID, which actually might be the reason why I got it, because maybe that's when the efficiency of the vaccine had wore off on me. Maybe it was like, okay, I'm due for it and that's why I got it. I understand that's also a possibility as well. Because I just got over COVID, I'm not rushing to get the booster right now, because I feel like, okay, I literally just had COVID 1 month ago. I don't think I need the booster right now, but I will consider getting it in another like 3 or 4 months. Because I'm sure me having COVID and surviving it probably built some sort of natural immunity towards it. But again, that could wear off. I have to look into it more, and I will consider getting a booster in like 3 or 4 months when I feel like my natural immunity has possibly have worn off at that point. But anyways, I don't know. I wanted to kind of talk about this with you guys because I often feel afraid to talk about it because, again, I feel like things are so divided right now that if you ask any questions about anything, and it goes both, by the way, it goes both ways too. It's not only, I'm kind of picking on the far left more in this conversation because I feel like the far left is what are typically who I've been kind of picking on this whole controversy with Joe Rogan and everything. But I find the same issues with the far right as well. I find like they're easy to, I feel like on the far right, they are bigoted on the far right in certain ways. And they're quick to classify people or judge people in a snapshot based on, like, okay, here's a random example. I remember I had a pixie cut 2 years ago-ish, and I remember I got a pixie cut because I just wanted to try it. I remember I saw the movie with Winona Ryder where she had a pixie cut. It was about, can't remember the name of the movie. Drop it in the comment section below if you know what I'm talking about. But it was about like women's mental health and stuff like that. And Winona Ryder was in it, and she got a pixie cut, and I thought she looked very attractive. And I always was like, huh, you know, and she's a brunette. So I was always like, I wonder what I would look like with a pixie cut. And I got one, and I remember a lot of people on the far right that I knew were like, oh, you're a feminist now? And I'm like, no, I just got a pixie cut. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wanted, like, I was like quickly stereotyped as being a feminist because I cut my hair off and because I had tattoos. And I'm like, I got tattoos because I like them, and I got a pixie cut because I thought Winona Ryder looked hot with one. I'm not making a political statement. So again, I'm just kind of pointing out that, yes, I did kind of pick on liberals mostly in this conversation, but don't get me wrong. I can rant for hours about people on the far right as well. Like, let's not get into QAnon, that shit, and other stuff like that, where I feel like there is a lot of bigotry on the right side as well. I'm just basically having a conversation about how I'm thirsty for longer conversations, more in-depth conversations about these political issues, and not sticking to a script and making such blank statements about people for asking questions or having opinions that go beyond the mainstream. You know what I mean? And I did want to follow up about the Joe Rogan controversy and explain that I am still supporting him, because I do not believe that those clips that are out there of him are him. I don't think they're him. I think that was him 10 years ago. And I'm telling you, if what I saw, if those old clips of him, if that's what was going on today, I wouldn't listen to him, because that's not who I don't like that. I didn't like that. That's not the person I enjoy. It's funny, in a weird way, it kind of reminds me of what happened with Louis C.K. as well. I think that I remember when the whole, you know, the thing happened with Louis C.K., I don't need to go into it. You guys know what I'm talking about. It was a really weird situation. And when that happened, I was genuinely sad about that. I think I was crying because Louis C.K. was my favorite comedian. Like, he still is my favorite comedian. And I just remember being like, are you fucking serious? I love this comedian. And now I'm just angry. And I was angry and I was hurt when I read those things about Louis C.K. And I actually stopped supporting him for 2 years after that. But then there became a point where he started performing again. He took a hiatus and then he started performing again. And I was left with this moral dilemma. Like, okay, do I support Louis C.K. again or do I not support him? And I chose to support him because, again, like going back to what I was saying in the beginning about Joe Rogan and that N-word compilation video, I do think people change and I do think people have it in them to change. And I think in certain situations, it isn't so black and white. It is gray. And I think the Louis C.K. situation was a very gray situation. It was like, all right, this is weird. I don't know what to think about this. He's not raping people. You know what I mean? Like, he is not Bill Cosby. Like, let's just put it that way. And I think there are some people who think that everything is Bill Cosby or not. And it's not the case. Like, there are situations that need to be weighed out, and there are situations that need that are more gray and not so black and white. And I think, like, for example, in Bill Cosby's case, it's like, I will be daring enough to say that he's a great comedian and his jokes are hilarious, but I will not, from what I've seen in the past, I will not support him anymore. I think he's evil. Like, I don't think there is a gray area there. I do think Bill Cosby is a piece of shit. I don't think Louis C.K. is a piece of shit. I think he's a weird pervert, but I don't think he harmed. I mean, maybe psychologically there was some harm done, but again, I think he changed. And the reason I decided to continue to follow Louis C.K.'s career after that was because I truly in my heart believe that he changed. I truly in my heart believe that he was able to look at himself and look at that situation and say, wow, I was wrong. That was fucked up. I will never do that again. And again, if he, you know what, if in 1 year something comes out where he's jerking off on people again, I will not follow him anymore after that, because I'll be like, okay, I gave you a chance to prove that you changed and you didn't, so I don't trust you anymore. You know what I mean? Goodbye. That's a different story. But that hasn't been the case, and I don't believe that will be the case. And I really, truly, in my heart, trust that Louis C.K. changed. And that's why I continued to follow his career. And I remember at the time that I didn't even make a political announcement about it. I remember I just posted something online saying, like, going to see Louis C.K. today. I'm so excited. And I got a lot of political shit from people about that how could you do this? He's disgusting. You don't support women's rights if you are going to support him. And I'm just like, again, it's so like, there's no room for conversation. And it's so, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I feel like there's a similar thing going on with Joe Rogan. I think now if you support Joe Rogan, you're a racist if you support Joe Rogan. And it's almost like now I have, like, when I'm driving around listening to his podcast in my car, I turn the volume down because I'm afraid I'm going to get shot by somebody if they hear me listening to him, like the assumptions that people might draw about me just by listening to him. And I must be a bigot and I must be a racist. And I'm just like, no, I just, it's a similar thing going on with Joe Rogan, like with Louis C.K. I don't think that situation with the video compilation of him using the N-word was that black and white. I do think that he has changed. I do think that he is a different person now and that he deserves love and compassion and forgiveness for that. And I trust that. And I trust that because I have seen so much footage of him that I'm like, that those bits of footage that went around are not the footage, not the hours and hours of footage I've seen the past 4 years at all. And I believe this person has changed. And if this person has it in them to apologize and to show humility and to change in the way that they have, that's somebody that I trust. And it's somebody I want to continue listening to. You know what I mean? And I also, by the way, I also understand that this might seem insensitive coming from a white woman. It's like, yeah, but you're not a black woman, so who are you to say it's easy for you to forgive something like that? I get that. That makes 100% sense. But I've also listened to a lot of black voices who have agreed with exactly what I'm saying. I've heard a lot of black women and black men. I've looked a lot into this, and I've heard a lot of other people say the same exact thing, that they're just like, and again, black voices, not just white voices, black voices saying, yeah, that was fucked up what he said, but I've never heard him say that. And I've been his really good friend for the past 5 years or so. Like, and I've never heard anything racist coming out of his mouth. And for that, I forgive him. So it's not just white people. like I'm not, like I'm just pointing out that this isn't a racist white thing to forgive him. It's like, no, a lot of people forgiving him, black, white, Chinese, blue, I don't give a fuck. Like a lot of people are choosing to forgive him because they trust him, because they've seen so much footage of him, so much authentic footage, and so much humility. And again, going back, it is pretty fascinating that people would choose to trust that over CNN and Fox, because where is CNN and Fox's podcast? You know what I mean? I don't think, I think a lot of the American public are sick of men in suits on both sides of the spectrum, this overly produced form of media. I think people are sick of that, and people want long conversations. At least I do. I don't know. I don't, maybe some people prefer just to digest their information in quick little bites like that, so they don't have to actually think about it. Maybe it's easier for people just to follow a script and not actually have to use their fucking brain and ask difficult questions. But I don't know. Apparently 11 million people who are following Joe Rogan don't think that way. Apparently 11 million people on both sides, liberal and conservative, want to have these longer, well thought out conversations, and want the conversations to go on for longer than just one day. You know what I mean? Some of these conversations are ever evolving conversations. And it's funny to me because I'm not a political expert by any means. I don't even feel like I have like a millionth of a percent of understanding of politics. I really do. But there is one thing I do understand 100% about politics, is that it's hella fucking complicated, and that it's not something that could be figured out in a short conversation, or ever figured out at all. And that's why it's kind of what is it? All I know is that I know nothing. It's pretty much what I'm saying. Is like, I know nothing in this, and because of that, I know, like knowing that I know nothing about this is the most knowledgeable thing that I could possibly know about this. Knowing that this is so complicated, that this is so nuanced, that there's so much to dig in. You know what I mean? There's so much to dig in with politics, and I think it's completely idiotic to think you know it all, to think you have it all figured out. You know what I mean? And whether that's either side of the spectrum, whether that's babies are, or Tom Hanks is eating baby blood, or whether it's, you know, Joe Rogan's a bigot, whatever. I'm just giving examples on the spot. I didn't really think this conversation out, or I thought it out, but I didn't plan it out. I just think, I don't know, man. I just know that politics are way too complicated for those quick statements. And I'm kind of at this point just dipping my toe into politics, because like I said, I kind of avoided it for the longest time, because I didn't feel like, I felt overwhelmed by how complicated it was. But right now at this point, I would say the two political issues that I can kind of understand a little bit about right now would be censorship. That's pretty much what this episode is about, is the politics of censorship, and student loans. I think those are really the only two things I can openly speak about and have an understanding about. But I will say this, I am an adult now, you know what I mean? I'm not a kid anymore, and I'm going to make it more of a responsibility to learn more about politics and continue to learn, because I'm kind of just dipping my foot in everything. But like I was saying in the beginning of this podcast, it's kind of selfishly, you know what I mean? It's kind of like, for the longest time, I wanted to avoid this because it made me think too much. And I didn't want to. Like, I was just like, I got a lot to think about. I don't want to add more to my plate. But now I'm just like, all right, well, now you're fucking with something I care about. You're censoring a voice that I really enjoy. or not censoring, but attempting to cancel and censor a voice that I really trust and enjoy. And that shit pisses me off. So now I am going to care. And I also care about student loans because I have a lot of student loan debt. So all selfish reasons to care about politics. But nevertheless, I'm kind of opening my eyes a little bit. And I'm kind of becoming more interested in this now. And I'm going to make a bigger attempt to listen to more, to understand more. And I'm just dipping my foot in the water at this point, though. There's so much to unpack. God, never mind history. I feel that's the other thing too. I feel like in order for me to even understand politics to its completion, I would have to then go back and understand history, because I never paid attention to history when I was in high school. And I'm just like, fuck, like, this is, like I was saying, this is such a big topic to unravel. It's a macro topic. You know what I mean? It's not a micro topic. It's a macro topic. And there's, in order for me to fully understand politics, if ever, and like I said, I will never fully understand politics, I would then have to go back and learn about history. So I need to learn about history and, God, so much. There's so much to know. I feel overwhelmed, but I am going to make, a conscious effort to read more and to understand more about contemporary politics and about politics throughout history and just history in general. You know, there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unravel. But all I know is that I've been awakened. I've been pissed off, and now I'm a little bit more awake now and want to know more and understand more. Anyways, I'm actually going to end the podcast here. I also do want to make a quick disclaimer. I just want everybody to know that even though I kind of ranted a little bit, I'm sure I may have offended somebody. I also want everybody to know that if you're my friend or you're my listener and you are a Democrat or you are a Republican, and even if you're a far Democrat and you're a far left Democrat or a far right Republican, I just want you to know that I am able to separate politics from humanity. That sounds dumb. I'm not saying that correctly. I can separate people's political stances from who they are as individuals. Okay. And I just want you to know that regardless of anything I've said today, I love all of you. I love my friends who are on the left, and I love my friends who are on the right. I have nothing but love for, my friends and family, regardless of whatever end of the spectrum you're on. I just kind of wanted to make that clear, because this episode was a little bit ranty, and I just wanted you to know that there's really no hate for anybody that I'm close with or anything like that. But anyways, this is the Pranzata podcast. If you enjoyed yourself today, don't forget to hit like, don't forget to hit subscribe. I am going to be interviewing a comedian tonight, so you can come back next Wednesday to hear from a Philadelphia comedian. And that's it. Have a good night, guys. Bye.